Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. First up on the show, we're going to be speaking with Max Costello from the Refugee Action Collective, and we're going to be speaking with him about the High Court decision it's a recent High Court decision actually, and on the 8th of November 2023, Stephen Gadler, the recently appointed Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, announced that at least a majority of the judges who had just heard a case involving the Migration Act 1958 agreed that indefinite immigration was unconstitutional. So we're going to be speaking with Max about this, and it's going to be a continuation of a discussion that I had with Pamela Kerr last week on the Doin Time show in regards to the fact that the indefinite detention is unlawful, that it was good news, but I wanted to go a step further and talk about how it's affected asylum seekers and refugees who are stateless and many, many other issues. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And then after that, we're going to be speaking with Keiran, who is the president of the Black People's Union. I want to actually get an update with him about what's happened with the referendum, the consequences of that, and looking at deaths in custody and land rights as well. And then after that, at 4:30, we're going to be speaking with Boe Spearim about massacres, Aboriginal massacres, and he actually does a podcast about this and many other First Nations topics as well. And speaking, first of all, we're going to be hearing from, and I wanted to welcome Max Costello to the program. Hello, Max.
Good afternoon, Marisa.
It's so lovely to have you. So, Max, let's start and talk about where you're from, what your title is, and let's talk about what's happened with the indefinite detention becoming unlawful and some of the consequences. Your article's excellent, by the way.
Yes, it got published in the Australian Independent Media AIM network yesterday, and it makes the point that Labor, in response to in the context of the recent High Court decision, which you succinctly summarised, Labor in government missed 4 pro-human rights opportunities, and I list them as 4 initiatives that Labor should have taken. I think it's perhaps if I could just briefly run through those. And the basic underlying point is simple, that when a citizen who's committed serious offences has completed his or her and been found guilty, has completed his or her prison term, he or she is routinely released. The number of people who are held by the court to never be released is infinitesimal. Virtually all citizens who commit serious offences and do prison time are released. So the fact that non-citizen serious offenders were about to be released as a consequence of the High Court decision is, well, so what? Everyone who's done their time should be released. Now, what I pick out from this is 4 initiatives Labor could and should have taken. Initiative 1 was to assert that point, that non-citizen offenders released into the community after serving time for serious offences A, B or C pose no more of a risk to the community than citizen offenders who've done time for offences A, B or C. All this talk about risk to the community makes out that only non-citizen offenders pose a risk to the community. They're the same as citizen offenders. Initiative 2 was to assert correctly that the criminal justice system already has and routinely uses powers to control releasees who pose serious risks. I mean, for example, serious sex offenders, when they're released, they are monitored, they have reporting to police requirements and other stipulations. They're on a sex offenders register. And if their offending involves children or domestic violence, they're prohibited from living or going near specified persons and or locations. So the only difference here with the release of non-citizens is that instead of having a court order impose those controls to protect the community, they'd be done via the visa system. Those sort of control restrictions would have been by the way of visa amendments. But the government should have said, well, okay, that's a bit of an administrative tweak, if you like, but in principle, there's nothing to see here. It's just people who might pose a risk are going to be dealt with. That is, if their offending is of a certain nature that needs to be subject to controls, they'll be released similarly to the citizen offenders. Now, building on those first two initiatives, and I call this Initiative 3, the government should have taken the opportunity to declare that the malevolent, decades-long demonisation of refugees and people seeking asylum, which falsely implies that almost all of them are uniquely dangerous criminals, must now come to an end. And then the final initiative I suggested, and I'm a member of the Refugee Action Collective Victoria, RACVIC for short, and we put a lengthy submission to the current inquiry into Australia's human rights framework. And our recommendations 2 and 3 suggest this. Instead of cancelling the visas of people charged with non-citizens charged with serious criminal offences, instead of cancelling those visas, which means then they must go straight into immigration detention. That's the problem. But if the visas weren't cancelled, they wouldn't. So instead of cancelling the visas, we say the government should just insert at the start of the whatever visa they hold the words, quote, provisional, pending clarification. So with that change, they wouldn't become unlawful non-citizens. That's what's happening when your visa's cancelled. While you've got a visa, you are a lawful non-citizen. When it's cancelled, you become an unlawful non-citizen subject to immediate immigration detention. So by just changing the wording and keeping the visa, that would avoid making them unlawful non-citizens who have to be detained, and it will also allow those non-citizens charged with serious offence, their cases, their situation to be managed by the criminal justice system, including via the bail and parole systems. In other words, those changes RACVIC suggest, if adopted, would transfer the management of those accused non-citizens from home affairs to the criminal justice system. Now,
so these recommendations, are quite good. However, how do I say? Given that detention is unlawful.
However you like, Marisa. Go on. Sorry.
No. I just wanted to alert listeners. If you could explain to listeners what is it that Labor and the opposition want to do now, because they're trying to mop up, in effect, aren't they?
Well, yes, this is, and the program, the Insiders program on Sunday was better than usual. They had quite a intelligent. Two of the women panellists were pretty on the ball, and David, what's his name, Spears. He's actually written to saying that what's the problem here? Citizen offenders are released. What's the problem with releasing non-citizen offenders? But what the government has done, bullied by Dutton, is to announce visa conditions such as, well, the sort of things I mentioned, that you could be, if you're a sex offender, you could be subject to those restrictions I've mentioned, but by a visa condition. But they go further, and they say that if you breach a visa condition, I haven't seen the legislation, but I presume it means the visa conditions they've just introduced, but maybe it means any visa condition. But anyway, breach those controlling visa conditions, then that is a criminal offence that must result in 5 years of imprisonment. Now,
but that doesn't happen to citizens in this country, though. Correct?
Well, yes, I suspect that not. Well, again, I haven't seen the legislation. If it's 5 years, if it's not a maximum sentence, but a fixed sentence of 5 years, that certainly doesn't happen to the equivalent citizen. I would assume that if you are a child sex offender and you are found lurking near a kindergarten, you would be committing an offence. So
sure, but what I'm saying, Max, is that that citizens would not have to go under the pump for that.
Well,
they serve their time and they get out.
No. What I'm talking about is citizens offenders who serve their time and are released.
And are released. Okay.
And are released. Yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, but the conditions, and I'm going on media reports, the
Sure.
other conditions are the imposition of ankle bracelets. It seems like some of the conditions they'll impose via visa, restrictions or constraints they'll impose by visa restrictions, are going to be via visa conditions. But making if that breach of visa, if those visa control conditions are breached, then you automatically get a 5-year prison sentence. That is going further. I'm sure there are prison or fine consequences for citizen offenders who've done time and are released. I'm sure there would be consequences for breaching the court-ordered conventions.
But I suppose, Max, one of the things that we've done on the Doin Time show over many years now is that we have always made a clear distinction, and it's not a very good distinction, in terms of people who have served their time and then they just serve their time. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, exactly.
And here, it's not like this, because you've got non-citizens who, even though the High Court has stipulated, as your article says, that indefinite detention is unlawful, the government is now scrambling to put in legislation that's going to put in extra things. Now, I'm not suggesting that sex offenders are not dangerous to the community, but what I'm basically saying is that these two classes of people are being treated differently.
Well, you're right, and I'd be very doubtful about how many citizen offenders are subject to having ankle bracelets. And there's another. We're talking. I just should mention this: that I watched the Question Time the last few days, and opposition spokesman Dan Tehan was repeatedly, in asking questions of Immigration Minister Giles, repeatedly referring to I think it was 84, but let's forget the number, 84, quote, hardcore criminal offenders, unquote. Now, the 84 that are released, and there might be more, are not all criminal offenders. He's wrong. They do, it's very unfortunate Minister Giles didn't correct him on that. And Alison, you see, Section 501, which is what gets people into immigration detention in the first place, is enormously wide-ranging, and big sections of it are subject to pure ministerial guesstimates or opinions. And I'll just give you one. This could
actually, Max, I'm going to have to stop you there,
Righto.
because, but can I normally don't make arrangements on air, but you know what? This is the Doin Time show. We can do it. We can do what we need to do.
All right.
Look, you have actually given me a very concise summary of what's going on with legislation, but I'd really like to have you. Can we make a time for next Monday for you to come back on?
I'll check my diary and get
check
back
your
to you.
diary and get back to me. I'm because we're going to be interviewing next Keiran, who is president of the Black People's Union, and we're going to be talking to him about, he's a First Nations activist, and we're going to be talking to him about a few things. And could you check your diary and send me an email, because I want to continue this discussion. So you've just heard an interview with Max Costello from the Refugee Action Collective, and I've had to cut him off in the middle of it because I've got other interviews. But we are going to have this fantastic activist back on next Monday, hopefully, Max, to continue this very important discussion, because it is a current affair, isn't it?
Thanks, Marisa. Look forward to it. Bye.
Please email me soon, Max.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.
For now.
Bye-bye. So I don't need to back announce, because I've just back announced it. And I'm just going to put on an announcement now, and hopefully we'll be going to Keiran very soon.
Stand in solidarity with Palestine this Sunday.
With the most devastating attack ever launched on the people of Gaza, it's time for all of us to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Israel has waged war on the Palestinians for the last 75 years. The Nakba, ethnic cleansing, occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza. Israel has now imposed a total blockade on Gaza and declared war, stopping food, electricity and fuel, and launching an all-out attack.
We have to mobilise to show our support for Palestine. 12 p.m, State Library, this Sunday.
Rally to demand freedom and justice for Palestine. No war on Gaza.
Free Palestine Melbourne is a 3CR supporter.
And in case you've just tuned in, this is the Doin Time show, 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, and we're going to be crossing over now to our next interview with Keiran from the Black People's Union. Hello, Keiran. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Marisa. How you going?
Lovely to have you. And you're the president, aren't you, of the Black People's Union?
Yep.
I'm good. Well, mostly, given what's been happening in the world. But wondering if you just tell us what land you're from.
Yeah, I'm from the Yuin Nation, which is on the south coast of what is now known as New South Wales.
So, Keiran, we're back on the Doin Time show after the referendum, which voted no, and we've given a lot of space for elders. And we've talked a lot about a lot of things, haven't we? We've talked about deaths in custody, which is really one of the things that I talk about a lot on this show, and land rights. What are your views in regards to what's happening now with the referendum, and where to from here?
Look, we're glad that the referendum failed. Hopefully, where to now from here is we get to take that energy back to the streets. We get to have the conversations we were having before we were distracted by the referendum, conversations about land rights and self-determination and our sovereignty, as well as, conversations about stuff like a Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody and having those recommendations implemented to try and reduce the amount of First Nations people that get incarcerated in the first place, as well as our deaths in custody rate.
And the deaths in custody rates are getting higher and higher, aren't they? There's been a suicide in Western Australia. We had Veronica Nelson, the inquest in January, didn't we? Too much going on.
Yeah, there's so much going on at the moment. And, it's absolutely atrocious that our deaths in custody rates do continue to get higher and higher, no matter, what the government says that they're going to do to help us. At the end of the day, when we look at the stats, when we look at the facts, we see that they're not actually helping. And, that's part of the reason as well why we were so against the Voice, because it was just another reform by the government that they, portray as something that will help our people, But at the end of the day, it doesn't help us, and our situations get even worse.
Moving forward, can you tell us a little bit about the Black People's Union and what will be happening from here?
So the Black People's Union, we're a bit of a mixed bag, a bit of a trades union, a bit of a political organisation, but, we're just a collective of First Nations people and allies who are working towards empowering First Nations sovereignty and trying to overthrow the colonial occupation that we live under here. And so where to from here is trying to build towards that, I suppose. Part of what we're trying to do in building towards that is trying to educate the public. So we run a lot of online information sessions and education classes on political theory. We do it all for free. It's open to the general public. We try and speak at a lot of different lectures and panels and rallies and just trying to get our message out there to the broader Australian population on board with what we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do will benefit non-Indigenous people here just as much as it will benefit First Nations people. Now, First Nations people aren't exclusionary. They're very inclusive people about bettering country and bettering the people on it. We're talking about those non-Indigenous people that live here as well.
I know. I mean, sovereignty was never ceded, and it just seems to me that one of the things that I have seen over the years and doing interviews with First Nations elders, activists, young people, is that it's not just about deaths in custody, but it's also about over-policing as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, here's the thing, right? People look at America as this massive over-policed state with this big incarcerated population. But when you actually break down statistics, Australia is just as bad, if not even worse. It's just because America has something like 10 times as big as a population as we do. Obviously, if something happens at the same rate, it's going to happen 10 times as much over there. But when we're talking about per 1,000 people, it's just as bad here in Australia. We've got such a massive police presence, especially in First Nations communities and communities that have higher First Nations population. And they're only there to protect the interests of the colony. They're not there to help the people. They don't serve the people. They only serve the interests of this colonial occupation and keep us oppressed and exploited and make sure that nobody in the working class steps out of line. And ultimately, that's their role. That's their main function.
I think what I have found incredibly frustrating, and I speak also as a woman from a non-English speaking background, is the way that we always have to be assimilated. Can you talk about that from an Aboriginal perspective?
Yeah, there's so much to talk about on that subject, I suppose. But, it is a massive problem, and it's been something that's, happened for 150 odd years now. Europeans came over here 235 years ago. When they first got here, they tried to wipe us out. When they realised that they couldn't completely wipe us out, they tried to assimilate us, and they've been trying ever since. And, what that looks like is the destruction of our languages, the destruction of our culture and our cultural sites. It's about, taking away our power and our sovereignty and our self-determination and our own identity so that we can be merged into this colonial system and, we won't be resistant to this colonial system. We'll be happy little Australians who will play the part of little Australians and everything will be fine and dandy for the colony. That's what it's all about. And we see these same sort of assimilation tactics used right across the world, and they're still being used today in different colonial occupations across the world. And the Voice was just, not to go on about the Voice so much, but the Voice was just another way of trying to assimilate us into this Australian constitution through a political assimilation of undermining our sovereignty and putting our sovereignty into the document that the Australian occupation relies on for their declaration of sovereignty, being the Australian Constitution. Sorry, my voice is a little croaky. I've been going around at protests last year.
That's okay. Let's talk about the Constitution. So isn't there a section in there about race?
Yeah, section it's either 51 or 52, part 26. It's what's commonly known as the Race Powers Act. Now, this is another thing about Australia. I bang on a lot about Australia and how horrendous it actually is. But Australia has the only federal constitution in the entire world that has a clause in the constitution that specifically empowers the federal government to make race-specific laws. So there's a little part in the Constitution that says the federal parliament can make race-based laws, and we're the only country that can make these racist race-based laws. And it was these exact race-based laws and that exact clause in the Constitution that allowed the federal government and John Howard to enact the Northern Territory intervention and to send the military into remote Aboriginal communities up in the Northern Territory. And, the only reason they were deployed there in the first place is because these communities were resisting mining companies and logging companies trying to come into their community and dispossess them of their land so they could destroy their sacred sites, do all the natural resources there. The only reason the Northern Territory intervention was implemented in the first place. Pardon me. But yeah, we're the only country in the entire world whose constitution has race-based powers. Like that's the despicable nation that Australia is. And, but of course it is. Like when we just look at our history, for example, when we look at Queensland's White Australia policies and we look at South Africa's apartheid policies, those apartheid policies over in South Africa were modelled on Queensland's White Australian policies. We're literally the nation that inspires apartheid around the rest of the world.
That's right. And that needs to be said. It needs to be said over and over again.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
I've got about a couple of minutes left of this interview before I go over to Boe Spearim, who's going to talk about Aboriginal massacres in Queensland. Do you know Uncle Jack Charles?
Yeah.
Yeah, Uncle Jack, as you know, passed away. And
yeah.
He's a prime example of stolen generation and sexual abuse in homes. He's been quite open about that and then going to prison. And look how he made it. He made it as an actor and a musician.
Yeah, and it's such an amazing, inspiring story. And there's, a lot of really great stories like that where, our people have really overcome so much adversity in their own personal lives to still make something of themselves and to still, make an impact on the world around them. It's a sad fact that we have to overcome such adversity in the first place, and it's something that we should have never have had to have done. But it really is inspiring to see people like that.
Keiran, thank you so much for coming onto the program as usual. I've really enjoyed your company and it's been great. I'd love to have you in the studio sometime and we can spend half an hour or so having a yarn. It'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. I've quite a lot to talk about.
Excellent. Any final comments before we finish?
Just anybody who's listening, part of what we've been doing lately with the BPU is trying to support direct action around what's happening in Palestine. So if anybody's got the capacity, I encourage people to get down to the dock to support the Block the Dock that's going on down there. I'm trying to stop arms being loaded onto ships to be sent to Israel to slaughter innocent Palestinian civilians.
When's that happening?
There's also it's a constant sit-in camp happening down at the docks down at Port Melbourne.
And
definitely
there was something else?
Yep. There's happening 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. There's also a sit-in at the steps of State Parliament House. Encourage people to go down there as well, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Go down, spend a bit of time, have a yarn to the people there, and just engage with that struggle.
What time is that?
9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day.
And the docks?
That's 24/7.
And of course, you've got your Sunday rallies as well at the State Library.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Sunday rallies at the State Library.
Keep up the good work, Keiran. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye. And that was Keiran, who is the president of the Black People's Union, speaking about a range of topics, including the Australian Constitution. And I'm actually going to be making a belated statement here, and it's still relevant, that this radio show contains audio images of, and has contained audio images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have died and discussion of deaths in custody.
Okay, this is a logging operation. Any person found within this coop is offending. Can they please leave? You're allowed no closer than the bridge down the track there. Any person that's found in the coop will be arrested and charged. I direct that you all leave now.
Gecko's turning 30 and we're having a party. The Goongerah Environment Centre has been fighting to protect East Gippsland's forests since 1993 and we want to party with you. There'll be music, performances, food, drink, old friends and new friends. What better way to celebrate the end of native forest logging in Victoria? From December 1st to the 3rd in Goongerah, East Gippsland. To find out more, go to gecko.org.au.
Gecko, 30 years fighting for forests. Get down to the party. Celebrate with us.
A 3CR supporter.
And you're back with the Doin Time show, and you just heard an interview with Keiran, who is the president of the Black People's Union, and we're going to be now speaking with Boe Spearim, and excuse me if I've pronounced your name wrong, Boe, and I'll be putting Boe through to the panel in a sec, and we're going to be speaking with him about what's happening with the map of Aboriginal massacres, some of the podcasts that he's doing, and a couple of other campaigns. I want to welcome you, Boe, to the program. Hello and welcome.
Hey, how you going?
Lovely to have you. So, Boe, do you want to just start off telling us what land you're from and your full name?
For sure, definitely. So, Yama, Boe Spearim, Gumaroi Kuma, Marawari, born in Western Sydney. I grew up on the south side of Brisbane, and do a podcast called Frontier War Stories. And also, a part of Warriors of the Aboriginal Resistance. Recently, during the whole referendum campaign, was a part of an organising group up here in so-called Brisbane called Freedom Before Voice. I've all been active out of Musgrave Park with the Brisbane Aboriginal Sovereign Embassy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Actually, it's the anniversary of Uncle Sam Watson is coming up soon in December, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful man.
Yeah, that's right, yes, yeah.
So, Boe, quite a lot there to digest, isn't it? Can you just tell us a little bit about your podcasts and talk about the Frontier Wars?
Yeah, for sure. So, I've always loved history. Yeah, as I was a kid, I've always been intrigued about, especially our history in this country, and blackfellas' role within, I guess, the contemporary sort of, history that is only 200 years old, which isn't long in terms of the how long blackfellas have been on this continent surviving and thriving. So, I've always been interested about the role that we played in the survival and in combating sort of colonialism in this country. So, looking at sort of our struggle against them has always been something that I wanted to look at as well, and frontier history here when I was growing up wasn't as visible, then, learning about Geronimo and, Sitting Bull and, William Wallace and, sort of all these other, indigenous sort of heroes who fought against colonialism on their own continent. And in particular, the British in different parts of the world. So, I always wanted to know about our heroes and how we survived. We didn't survive because of, in the beginning because of the goodwill of, the British. We survived because of, the resistance and, the resilience of Aboriginal people on the frontier.
Absolutely. And who are your heroes, do you think?
Well, that's a great question.
Because there'd be many.
That's it. That's an amazing question that, we should be asking, a lot of not just Aboriginal people, but non-Indigenous peoples who call Australia home, who are, the Indigenous, if that's what you want to use, heroes of Australia, during this, during said time, 1788, so around the 1930s and 40s, majority of people would most probably understand and pick and know the explorers and, the governors and all these other people, but they wouldn't necessarily think about, the First Nations warriors like, Pemulwuy, Dundalli, Yagans, Yandamara, Mosquito, Tundaminaway, Walliar and Truganini, and, the list goes on and on and on, and how they survived, and if they died on the frontier, why they died. They made a conscious decision to sort of, defend their law and their freedom and their community at any cost, and, sometimes the greatest cost, which was their lives. Exactly,
and I want to see if I can get Lyndall Ryan back on, because she talked quite a lot about the map of the massacres. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, definitely. I've had on the podcast to talk specifically about some of the work she's done in New South Wales in regards to like Mile Creek and Waterloo Creek, which is on my country, but then also specifically about the map as well, which is an important sort of resource to have, and to put into context, just how heavy and brutal and fast-paced, the invasion of this country was. It only took them around 50 years to get to Gomeroi country after the invasion. So from 1788 to 1838, they're already on, actively hunting Gomeroi people to massacre them because they were resisting and tormenting pastoralists and farmers on Gomeroi country. And then also to mention, so over here in Australia, Australia was gazetted as as we know, a penal colony. So we took the convicts from England and housed them here. But what also happened around that time was other Indigenous peoples in South Africa and Aotearoa and some other parts of the world were resisting colonialism and the invasion of their land. So their punishment was they were sent to Australia for life for their punishment of being involved in resisting colonialism. So they were sent to places like Cockatoo Island and, off the islands of the shore of Tasmania and the various other prison sort of camps. And in 1952, there was an investigation into Aboriginal people dying in prison custody. So we're not talking about 2023 and having almost 600 Aboriginal people die in custody and needing justice and an investigation into these things. But now we're talking about 1852, I think it was, where they had their first formal investigation into why Aboriginal people were dying in the system. And the people that they were investigating, they were Gomeroi warriors who would most likely have been brought to these prison camps from back on country for fighting colonialism, and they were in these prisons for a couple of weeks and died, possibly because of their injuries, the wounds that they sustained, but then also the diet and the conditions of the prisons.
It's really bad, and nothing much has changed today, really, has it?
No, nothing. No, Aboriginal people are still dying in custody. Aboriginal children are still being locked up at a high rate or removed from their families. So, even back in the day, earlier sort of frontier days, they were stealing kids and locking kids up because they were actively participating, in fighting against colonialism as well on their land. So, they hunted young black kids, and they arrested black kids, and they put them in chains as they did, on adult Aboriginal people, male and female, who are, I guess, caught resisting, and wanted, justice for mob, and same thing, they got arrested for resisting and living and wanting to, have their own rights to exist.
Yeah, it's it's all tied in, isn't it? I mean, I know in August there were some rallies happening with about Santos and the CSG project, which was planned on land in the Pilliga Forest in northwest New South Wales.
Yep, the Pilliga Forest, yeah.
Forest. And Goomera have a registered native title claim, don't they, there?
Yep, and have in recent times, not before recent times, because they were very sly and we're thankful now that the people who sit on the native title body who have been somewhat like holding Santos to account. And, nowadays they are, but before they weren't. They were doing backdoor sort of agreements and meetings that weren't transparent to the rest of the Boomera people. So we made it a thing to vote them out and get some fresh blood or whoever else is going to be a part of that as well. Be a part of the struggle to protect home. Like there's been many Boomera people over the years that have been fighting for country, which is awesome, but just sort of the native title body. But it's been amazing. I went to my first native title meeting a couple of years ago, and me and my family don't actively participate in that because of the trauma that's caused, our mob. And one thing that we did sort of say is, look, this might be the first and last time that we do this, but we're doing this to actively say no. And that was at a native title meeting back in, I want to say 2020 or 2021. And, the majority of the room, about 96% of the people in the room voted no. So about, I think it was 2 abstained and like 3 or 4 bloody vote no's. Oh, sorry, yeah, to Santos, and we're thankful now that this native title body are being transparent on their decisions to represent mob properly, but then also say no to Santos as well, which has been an amazing thing because, like I said, we literally have to sort of chase down or look at photos where certain community members are meeting for native title meetings with these mining companies and try and bust in there and say, hey, what's up? But it's definitely something that is very close, to home for, myself in regards to, one day wanting to, live back on country and, what a way to sort of, serve country is to defend it as well. And, Santos is one of many mining companies. At one point in time, there was, we've had up to 28 active mines on Boomera country. So, Santos is just sort of the flavour of the month, and we're willing and continuing to defend country and fight these mining companies.
Absolutely. I mean, although native title, is it actually a bit disempowering, do you think?
Hell yeah, of course, definitely. Well, one thing, it isn't, land rights, and it isn't full self-determination, and it isn't giving mobs the opportunity to really, access and, get country back and, do all the things that, we would do if we could have true self-determination of a country. And have better access to a country, but then also create our own sort of infrastructures on country that would provide, jobs, but then also housing and employment, but things like being back on country, like that's an aspiration to have. I don't think native title can ever do that, but we had to use this means to sort of pull Santos up, and we've done that on a few occasions this year and last year, and it's gone to the tribunal every time the judge has sided with Santos, and it was in the High Court earlier this year. The result hasn't been handed down, so they must be still doing that. So we're waiting for that as well at the moment to understand where to next. But it's definitely land back or nothing. The mean with these guys.
Absolutely, and it's really look. I'm not saying that native title is not useful. It is. But as long as you have equal negotiations,
Yeah. Well, you'd like to think so, and then, it depending on who and what you're negotiating about, but always remembering that there is no veto rights, and the government can step in at any time to intervene and sort of take control of the narrative and, co-opt it so it becomes something that so like we voted no. And so the tribunal stepped in and put an injunction in, to go to court. And the judge that we had the first time, man, he was an arsehole and, very friendly towards Santos. Like the vibes that, we got from that individual. But, that doesn't deter us or steer us away from our struggle and our fight and knowing what we want.
Exactly, because it's not just about climate change, it's also about giving back country to First Nations people.
Yeah, that's it. Like I said, it's land back or it just doesn't work, and it just ain't right. If we don't see some sort of return, then we're going to be upset and we'll be ready to pursue sort of other avenues. That's definitely something that a lot of our mob, I'm sure would be keen to sort of engage us as well, which we need. We need that mob as well.
Exactly. I wanted really to invite you onto the show to give you an opportunity to talk about that. That's really important, isn't it? Because Santos, just to clarify for listeners, is a mining company, right?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. It's a mining company. And the type of mining that they want to do is fracking. And there's different forms of fracking. There's in conventional fracking, and there's different ways they do it, where they either one's just sort of straight down and in a straight line, others are in an angle, but both of them use dynamite under the ground to explode and then to sort of suck the gas up. And when they do these sort of underground explosions, this is usually when the waters become contaminated, because it cracks the gas and cracks the earth, and then there's a crack in sort of one of the waterways, and gas gets into there. And we saw images of people in America lighting up their stove, and gas comes out, or flames, and you see what happened in Tyre in Western Queensland a couple of years ago, where somebody lit, the local creek on fire because of the huge gas fields there. So, these are the potential sort of outbreaks or kind of risks that we face on Gomeroi country, and to understand that, where they're drilling is the Pilliga Forest, and beneath the Pilliga Forest is one of the greatest, largest underground aquifers, if not in the world, but in this side of the world, the Great Artesian Basin, which, connects Queensland, goes from Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Northern Territory. I don't know about Victoria, but, it takes up a huge, vast amount of country. In different parts of the country, they have recharge centres where the water sort of surfaces and then goes back down. I think that's how it recharges. I don't know. But, there's certain key points where, the waters are. We're connected to the mob up in Claremont, the Wangians and Glenga mob. Like, we're connected to them through the underground aquifers, So what happens up there with Adani is going to be the same result as what's happening here with Santos, like the breach or the risk of contamination. And then I'm sure it'd be the same in SA, if there's any mining activity there. I know there's uranium mines, I know they want to dump uranium, but I also know they want to frack uranium there as well. And we know what's happening up in the Northern Territory with the Beetaloo Basin as well. So, I think these areas, maybe possibly the Great Artesian Basin may take into some of that land. I don't know. But it's quite sad that, nearly on all fronts, there's a potential for huge, contamination.
So there's been no outcome as yet?
No, not that I'm sure of. I haven't seen anything, and I'm sure we'll get some heads up and stuff. And when we do, I'll let you know as well, so we can have another yarn. Yeah,
that'd be great, because, at this stage, there's no fracking there, right?
Well, they've been given the go-ahead to frack, not frack, but to assemble what do you call it? 850 gas wells, like that. Like, they've been approved for phase one. Mm-hmm. We're just sort of stopping them in regards to where they're doing it. So at the moment, there's already one gas.
Oh, wow.
Repository. I don't know if there's already one of those from a previous sort of venture, or I think from when they were just testing it, so they've capped it. And that's sort of the only way they stop the flames, is that they just put a cap over it if they can't put it out. And then you hope, it doesn't explode. But yeah,
that's right. So can you just tell us, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's really important that people know what's going on. And we'll have another yarn really soon. Can you just tell us about your podcast, where we can get hold of those?
Yep, for sure. So if you pretty much just Google Frontier War Stories, you will be directed to either the one that's on Spotify. You can listen. Sorry, say it again.
Sorry, just where the podcasts are.
Yeah. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the streaming platforms. But if you were to Google it, you'll find it on Awesome Black, which is a First Nations podcasting site, which I do urge people to check out anyway. They have a whole host of original podcasts there that are produced by themselves and other mob as well. So there's kids podcasts, my podcast, they call it Trash Titters, like three sister girls sort of sitting down just yarning about sort of, Aussie culture and sort of just, making fun of it as well. But that's an awesome place to go to listen to First Nations content. But yeah, so if you just Google it, you'll find it anyway, or just check out whatever your favourite platform is as well.
I ended up being able to get access to a lot of those podcasts. I'm still listening, going through them all. It's pretty amazing. Thanks so much, Boe, and I'm hoping to have you back really soon. Thanks a lot.
Definitely. That's all good. Thank you.
Take care.
Likewise.
Bye. And that was Boe Spearim speaking about fracking and also the interconnections with prison and deaths in custody and, it's frontier wars. It's really important to link all those things up. It's approximately 4:54 and you're listening to the Doin Time show And we're actually nearing the end of our show. Thank you very much to all our guests for coming in. Thanks to Max Costello, who spoke about a landmark court ruling that paves the way to end the indefinite detention of asylum seekers whilst this is an important step in the right direction. He also explains why there is more work to be done for the justice and human rights of all refugees and asylum seekers that have suffered the damage of our government's cruel and inhumane policies. And then after that, we spoke with Keiran, who is the First Nations president of the Black People's Union, and he spoke a lot about deaths in custody as well. I felt that it was really important to highlight a lot of things that First Nations people have suffered, and we looked a lot at general trauma of asylum seekers and refugees as well. So we've got about a minute left. Take care of each other, and we're going to be going out now with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella by the Rumpy Band. And stay tuned every Monday, 4 to 5 for the Doin Time show. Bye.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Black fella, white fella, it doesn't matter what you colour, as long as you a true fella, as long as you a real fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places, it doesn't matter what your name is, we got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it, we need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's got